this is the first summit that we've held since February due to the devastating impact of COVID-19. And in recognition of the lives lost and of the terrible toll of COVID, we would ask that you will join us in a minute of silence to remember the lives lost and to reflect on the terrible tragedy. About that.
Can we request the people who are attending to switch off their mics if they're not speaking, or maybe also the video can also be switched off, only those people who speak, otherwise you're not able to hear much. So if it's not an inconvenience here.
Thank you, Senior Advisor. I think most people will have heard that. Just a reminder, if you could please switch off your microphones and your videos as well, just to limit the feedback and the background noise. We will now start the minute of silence.
Thank you.
Thank you all. As I noted, this is our first Sunmeet since February, and we're absolutely delighted that you can join us for what will no doubt be an engaging and interesting discussion. We are going to cover a range of topics today, an update on what we've been doing in these COVID times, an update on our recruitment processes, but in particular, a focus on financing. Given as countries are starting to look towards a post-COVID future and a green recovery, we thought it was absolutely important that we start to talk about financing and how solar can figure as part of that green recovery. I'd now like to welcome our distinguished guests, our member countries, and all those who've been able to join us, and in particular, His Excellency Sri Indu Shekhar Chaturvedi, the new Secretary of the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. And with that, I'll hand over to the Director General, PG.
Thank you, Fiona. Once again, our condolences for the victims of this pandemic, but life must go on. A very good morning and welcome to you all. After a long COVID break, we met last was in February. Trust all of us and our loved ones are safe. And welcome to this cyber version of Sunmeet. As we reinvent ourselves during the pandemics, Sunmeet has become a part of ISA family. It has become a place of 3Ds. We call it deliberations, dialogue, and democracy. In fact, in the last 26 times when we met, we discussed, we deliberated. In fact, we also put the regional groups together to form the governance structure. I have some special actors to welcome and appreciate their attendance today, apart from you all. First is the UK. In fact, UK has joined as the Vice President of the Europe and other region, and so is the Netherlands as additional member. Our governance structure is complete. Of course, we welcomed the Vice Minister from India, His Excellency Mr. Indu Shekhar Chaturvedi. He is a distinguished member of the Indian Administrative Service who has taken over the Secretary of MNRE. He has just recommended for fast-tracking the ISA headquarters and is seized of the issue of long-term financial sustainability of ISA. He has also quite a bit of experience in multilateral organizations, including IMF. Further, I avail this opportunity to record a great appreciation of His Excellency, Mr. Anand Kumar, the previous Vice Minister from India, who was a pillar of strength and ideas and was instrumental in helping us with $7 million as operational grant during his tenure. I also avail this opportunity to thank His Excellency, Mr. Barry O'Farrell, the High Commissioner of Australia to India, for Australia's contribution of around $100,000 for ISA Care initiative. And as you know, we have launched the ISA Care initiative to solarize the primary health centers and hospitals, starting primarily with small island countries and LDCs, and a whole lot of things will be presented to you later. I take this opportunity to thank His Excellency, Mr. John Manjori, Chief Executive of the Civil Service and the Permanent Secretary of the UK Cabinet Office, and the Executive Director of Government Communication, Mr. Alex Aikane, for having sent a team to strengthen ISA communication functions and bring it to global standards in a time-bound manner. I must also inform all that I made a presentation on ISA on 27th of May before the Honorable Indian Prime Minister, and he provided a lot of guidance on how to take ISA to the next level. One such idea was to prepare well for the next COP26 and put up a substantive activities rather than speeches and panel discussions. Another idea was to prepare ISA's 5-year vision document that accommodates the experiences of COVID-19, which in fact ISA Care is a big response to that. One more advice was to be more active in the technology front, aggregate demand, and bring down the cost of technology. My colleagues in the Secretariat, who are all working 24/7, even during COVID days, are all working on these matters. We plan to organize quickly a solar technology summit to take stock of latest state-of-the-art and next generation technologies. And my colleague, Mr. Philip Malbrans, whom I'm going to introduce just now, is working on it. And I take pleasure to introducing Mr. Philippe Malbrans, a friend of mine since 2016, who headed the French National Institute of Solar Technologies, Solar Energy, INES, for last 20 years, for having joined us in the remote mode from France. I thank the French ambassador, His Excellency Lenin, Ambassador of France to India, for having facilitated this secondment to ISA. As such, I won't be taking more time, but I must mention the Honorable President of the Assembly has taken a series of meetings to streamline the ISA issues. One such thing was the mobilization of $100 million research mobilization drive, for which the standing committee has also appointed some committee pending the report coming in. He also took a meeting to launch ISA Care and a whole lot of other activities along with the co-president, France. And what we have done, we have circulated the progress report of activities to all. I would request your feedback on the same, and as such, your guidance has been instrumental in reaching the place where we are today. Another important thing is that we are going for recruitment of 16 officers globally. And due to some delay in that, we saved some money. So, like a true organization that serves the interest of the members, we are planning to give that money to LDCs and SEEDS member countries who are interested in taking up innovative solar projects in areas of cold solar cooling or solarization of hospitals and solar pumps. In fact, we are planning to send a letter to the Honorable Ministers for expressing their interest and choosing the technology they would like to promote, and we will move fast and forward. This apart, we are organizing, apart from the Solar Technology Summit, maybe in July or August or September, depending on the convenience of the Prime Minister of India. We also plan to have a joint activity with WHO and UNAIDS to promote the ISA Care program, and we are putting a whole lot of initiatives and concrete projects that was perhaps lacking with us earlier. And in these 47 projects of $50,000 each, we would make sure that there is so much of capacity building in the country concerned that these projects don't go dysfunctional after they are commissioned. So as a part of the project, we will make sure that one mechanic or engineer from that particular country is trained for a sufficient period who can actually look after the maintenance, plus the company which provides these projects or implements these projects, either with the sovereign country's consent or by the sovereign country itself, must have built-in provision for 5 years annual maintenance. So the idea is the projects that ISA gives, must be well looked after even after that goes, and it should be a bottom-up approach in the sense the community or the sovereign member country actually owns it up. We have also strengthened the Star Center, our Star C project with the help of UNIDO, and we are putting $500,000 of money with UNIDO so that there is enough experience that can be brought in and can be shared. With this, I once again welcome you all. I thank you all, and I request Fiona to take the program forward.
Thank you so much, Director General. I would now like to invite His Excellency Shri Indu Shekhar Chaturvedi, the new Secretary of the Indian Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, to please present his inaugural remarks to this forum. Thank you, Shri.
Thank you very much. Thank you also for your kind words. Mr. Upen Tripathi, Director General, International Solar Alliance, Excellencies, distinguished participants, I'm very happy to be a part of this monthly event. This also happens to be my first Sun Meet. The theme for today is particularly important, as we all know that without affordable financing, expanding energy access through solar energy solutions will be very, very difficult. By its very composition and charter, the International Solar Alliance is uniquely placed to undertake coordinated action on ensuring ensuring availability of low-cost finance for deploying solar energy solutions in member countries. Such financing in most developing countries suffers from a perception of high risk for the investors, and this needs to be addressed. I understand that the models to be presented today will highlight the perspectives of the financial institutions. I hope today we will take a step forward in developing robust portfolios of solar energy projects for the member countries. I also understand that the World Bank's Solar Risk Mitigation Initiative will help in enabling access to finance at lower costs in large volumes for solar-related projects in ISA member countries. The International Solar Alliance's role will be critical for expanding the share of solar energy in future global energy mix and also in improving energy access. The organization is a collective endeavor of large number of countries. It is now the responsibility of all member countries to help it in achieving its goals. I have no doubt the organization will also see great success in future, and the efforts it has made so far indeed are very, very promising. And here I would like to mention a recent report on COVID and its impact on the solar energy sector, which the ISA has brought out. And this report has clearly demonstrated a loss in the phenomenal momentum that the sector had built over the years. And therefore, ISA's role and the role of other multilateral development agencies has become really more important. And I would also like to take this opportunity to join others in offering condolences to those who have lost their near and dear ones in the pandemic. I'll end with these short remarks, and I compliment the ISA Secretariat for organizing the webinar, and I wish this event all success. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Secretary G. We very much appreciate the kind words, and we are most grateful that you were able to attend today. With that section of this event finished, I'd now like to please hand over to my colleague Jagjit Sareen, the Director of Finance, for his update on the programs and projects of ISA and what we have been doing during this time. Jagjit?
Thanks, Fiona. Thank you, DG, and thank you for your opening remarks for today. I hope I'm audible, Fiona.
Yeah, you
Yes, you
are.
are.
Thank you. And second, hopefully everyone can see my presentation as well.
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you very much, Fiona. This COVID has brought a lot of humility in everyone in how, when nature impacts, how little the humanity feels. And this is just a reminder that we need to redouble or triple our efforts to combat climate change. As someone said, this is just a trailer of the big horror movie of climate change, which will unfold in coming decades and reinforces the mandate of ISA and frankly rejuvenates our energy. So what I'm going to do this morning is to present you all an update on what ISA Secretariat and broad ISA family has been doing under the strong, able leadership of our President of Assembly, Minister R.K. Singh, and guidance from Secretary and our Honorable DG, what the Secretariat has been up to in the last few months while battling the impacts of COVID and frankly managing our household affairs as well. Many of you would be familiar with this slide in the sense that what ISA has done in the last 2 years is aggregated demand in various programs, which amounts to, in dollar terms, about $5.5 billion of new concept proposals, which could be turned into a robust pipeline and projects to be implemented on the grounds. There is a difference in the size of projects being aggregated and number of countries which have participated in various programs, and we are actively working with countries to translate these concept proposals into real project proposals, supporting through pre-feasibility studies and due diligence, but also through aggregation of demand, launching various price discovery tenders. One we have completed in water pumps. The second one to be launched would be on solar home systems, thereby bringing the cost reductions so that our member countries would have a baseline price to negotiate with the vendors and manufacturers. But today my focus would not be on the aggregation, but on specific activities which the Secretariat, under the guidance of our leadership, has been able to implement in past few months since we last met in February. Given the theme for today's Sun Meet is financing, let me stay focused on the theme of financing and what we've been able to achieve in past few months or have initiated and is in the right direction to be completed in next few months. Let me start with the left-hand side bucket of innovative financial instruments. A colleague of mine from the World Bank will be elaborating more on SRMI, but just to update, it's been operationalized. A couple of $100 million project has been submitted for approval to Green Climate Fund, and soon we would see projects being financed under SRMI as a global concept, while we have already seen ROGEP and Maldives benefiting from SRMI principles of financing. We have been working actively with Exim Bank and AFD France to get projects financed from the already committed funds of $2 billion from Exim, from Indian aid, and euros 1.5 billion from France. In addition, what ISA has been able to do in past few months is to work more actively with few of the agencies which have been empaneled like EESL and NTPC, so that they could facilitate implementation and mobilize financing for projects in member countries. And in subsequent presentations, you would see where all the impact has been achieved already. Last year, a proposal was presented to the Finance Committee of ISA that ISA should explore revenues from carbon credits or mitigation reduction benefits generated from the solar projects implemented with the assistance of ISA in member countries. I'm happy to update that ISA has started working with a globally renowned organization, Gold Standard, for developing solar credit mechanisms for ISA member countries. Essentially, this could become potentially additional source of revenue for both small scale and large scale solar projects. Moving forward in kind of a in circular fashion, the technical and financial support we've been able to offer in the past 4 months. We have completed pre-feasibility reports for almost all the countries which had submitted demand under solar water pumps program, and also expediting our work for mini grids and solar parks. We have started working on also offering financial support to LDC and SIDS member country. These are recent happenings or approvals from the standing committee, the third standing committee, which met a month ago. They approved or recommended to Assembly 2 important measures to support our member countries. First is financial assistance, which would support project preparation activities in SIDS and LDC member countries. It would be provided to our member countries through NFPs, following all fiduciary standards of ISA as an international organization. But this modest support of upper limit of about $5,000 per year per country would be, I think, would be useful in doing due diligence and pre-feasibility report preparation for the projects we've been talking about. Again, based on the guidance received from the third standing committee, as DG highlighted, we are working on modalities to provide technical and financial support to LDC and SIDS member countries for implementing demonstration projects. Here, the funding bucket would be around 50,000 USD per country, and we would be able to finance technical assistance plus direct financing for demonstration projects. Two elements to emphasize in these projects: we would be pushing forward with innovation either through business models, new financing modalities, or some innovation in technologies. These projects should not be run-of-the-mill, which would happen anyway without ISA assistance. So we would make sure that some innovation is visible. A training for bankers and entrepreneurs is being worked out and would be launched soon. Given COVID times, these trainings would be virtual, but we believe that we could impart these trainings effectively to bankers and entrepreneurs in our member countries to ramp up the capacities for a large unleashing of financing in our member countries. Along those lines, we have started working with UNEP on a joint study for solar waste management guidelines, including measures for a circular economy concept, because as you know, while we push for large scale and more solar projects, having a whole life cycle view of solar technology is very important. And hopefully by Assembly, we would be able to offer policy recommendation to ministers from member countries for their approval and further guidance. Again, given COVID times, we've been proactive to put together an initiative which we call ISA Cares Initiative. Essentially, the idea is very simple, that in primary healthcare centers in our member countries, what we see is that that electricity is the second biggest hurdle for their effectiveness after availability of medicines in our member countries. And hopefully with ISA Care Initiative, we would be able to mobilize resources to solarize at least one PHC in each of the district or administrative unit of our SIDS and LDC member countries. This comes about to be about a $7 to $8 million grant play, and we are actively seeking funding from various donor member countries. Australia has provided some seed money, and we are grateful for their support. Linked to that, just checking, I hope my presentation is visible, Fiona.
No, Jagjit, it is not visible.
Oh,
No, it's
okay.
not.
Okay, let me. Is it visible now, sir?
It is not.
No.
It is now, Jagjeet.
Yeah, now it's visible.
Okay, thank you. So, linked to our COVID response support, ISA working with UN AIDS and Global Health Innovation Exchange would be launching a solar grant challenge at their flagship annual event on 2nd of July. Essentially, the idea is to seek problems from member countries which are in health and solar space, and bring the entrepreneur and innovative energy from startup ecosystem and bring about solutions. We'll start with a sample size of countries, few pilot countries, but would expand this to all member countries in coming times. Again, this modality was approved by Second Assembly. We are just trying to be more useful to countries for their COVID response and marrying the solar and health innovations together. As Honorable Secretary mentioned, we did launch a report on impact of COVID on global solar market. We had representation from heads of various global institutions, both public, private, and governments, senior government officials at the launch of this report, and everybody found this report very timely and useful. Moving on, there was a bit of a technical glitch. I hope my slide is visible now.
It is.
Okay, so let me move a little faster. Again, last year we received a lot of feedback from our member countries to asking Secretariat to outline a roadmap for mobilizing $1 trillion. Again, to update that, we are working with World Resources Institute to develop the financing roadmap. We've received some seed money from a foundation, and at the Assembly, we would be providing the first cut analysis and scoping work of this financing roadmap. We are developing country profiles and an ease of doing solar analysis for all 86 member countries, essentially analyzing the prevailing ecosystem in our member countries to promote solar. It's built along the lines of ease of doing business report by the World Bank, but customized for our purposes. And as you would recall, last year we did launch a smaller version of this report covering only 4 countries, but this year we will cover all 86 countries. A technical feasibility analysis of World Solar Bank is underway, and hopefully in the coming Assembly will present the proposal as well. And last on this list of the broader mobilization agenda for solar investments, it's great to note that Ministry of New and Renewable Energy has launched RFP to conduct technical feasibility study for One Sun, One World, One Grid vision laid out by Honorable Prime Minister at the First Assembly. ISA Secretariat and World Bank would be working with the ministry to take forward this feasibility analysis. Under Star Sea project, we are moving forward with UNIDO as our partner to fully operationalize Star Sea project. My colleagues Cecil and Fiona have been working 24/7 to operationalize it, and various seminars, the webinar focus on solar applications and related issues have been conducted under Star Sea projects, and people have found it very useful and topical. Final update on this list is financial sustainability of ISA. Again, this is a matter of concern and urgency to us. At the Second Assembly gave a mandate to the President and the Co-President to actively seek voluntary contributions, and tasked the Secretariat to support the principals or the governing body to mobilize these voluntary contributions. At the third standing committee, ISA Secretariat presented ISA theory of change, essentially the modalities by which we will operate, and a resource mobilization strategy to mobilize $100 million by end of this year. Just to underline, the $100 million would be utilized for 3 years of implementation. So essentially, it's about $30+ million a year, which is very modest if you compare with the budgets of any other comparable international organization. And we hope to have a pledging dinner on the eve of the third assembly, that's 14th of October. Modest gains have already been made. I must commend the leadership of host country India and the Secretary and Honorable Minister that even during these COVID times, 3 of Indian PSUs were generous enough to provide $1 million each to ISA Corpus Fund. A meeting is planned rather tomorrow with more corporate partners from India and beyond to launch what we call a coalition for responsible climate action, to harness the energies of public and private sector companies for the global good, for realizing the objectives of ISA, and along the way also strengthening the financial sustainability of ISA. The next few slides are more elaborate illustration of ISA theory of change. I would not go into details of this, given I'm almost out of my time, but these slides would be sent to you all, and we would be happy to engage in a detailed discussion. But just to quickly run them through, this slide presents ISA theory of change. The next few slides present how ISA resource mobilization strategy is being conceptualized and would be implemented. We are working on 13 concept proposals for which 70 million would be raised to implement these projects in next 3 years across the themes of energy access, resilience, avoiding deforestation, solar for agriculture, solar for transportation, healthcare, and capacity building. We are taking a broad tent approach to mobilize these funds so that no country under these COVID times is strained. So we are looking at 35 potential donors. Essentially, it comes out to be about $1 million or $2 per year, which is very small amount given the kind of contributions these organizations or countries make for meeting global challenges. Just in terms of strengthening ISA as an organization, internally, Director General is working hard with the team to set the organization fit for purpose. There is a recruitment drive initiated. You will hear a detailed presentation. We are in process of implementing an enterprise resource planning software to make or implement rather all our financial, administrative, and HR regulation and processes. We are only 3 countries short of getting the amendment effective to make ISA a body with universal membership. And we are working to strengthen again the modalities of implementation within ISA, its programs, so that we could make the organization which is effective, efficient, and attracts donor funding and responsible to the mandate given to us by member countries. With that, Honorable Secretary and DG, I conclude my presentation and happy to clarify any issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jagjit, for that update. We really have been very busy in the past couple of months, and it's been great to hear you outline that work. If there's no interventions at this point in time, I will now hand over to my colleague, Mr. Anand Rao, the Director of Human Resources and Coordination, to introduce the presentation on the organisational roadmap and the recruitment of international staff. Anand, over to you.
Thank you, Fiona. Thank you. Distinguished dignitaries, Your Excellencies. I'll be taking you through the organizational roadmap that has been approved by the Standing Committee and the Second Assembly of ISA on the brief recruitment process. I'll be also having a joint presentation, and the process of recruitment will be briefed by our colleague, Mr. Kevin. Soon after my presentation on the organizational roadmap, Kevin will take over. Fiona, can you see the presentation?
Yeah, it is there. Go on.
Yes, we can. And
But you need to change the slide.
Yeah, I'm moving this slide now. Yeah, you can see this now. The proposed organizational roadmap responds to the key priority areas of strengthening the ISS Secretariat, which was approved by the Second Assembly under the work plan and budget for the current year 20 and the year 2021. And this organizational roadmap provides a detailed mapping of various international staff positions that are to be recruited as per the institutional structure that is approved by the Second Assembly of ISA. The guidance from the Second Assembly, the Assembly at its second session approved the recommendations of the Standing Committee on institutional structure of the Secretariat, which will comprise of staff strength as follows. There will be 4 directors at the P4 and P5 level. There will be 12 technical executives at P2 or P3 level, and there will be support staff to the maximum strength of 24 people, and this will be recruited locally. The criteria for recruitment will be as below. There will be due consideration for securing the highest standards of efficiency, competency, and integrity. The priority consideration will be given to equally qualified women candidates. There will be a due regard for the importance of recruiting staff from member countries and on wide geographical basis. When it comes to general service category, the recruitment on wide geographical basis is not applicable. Now, on the guiding principles of this selection will be based on competition, objectivity, transparency, diversity, non-discrimination, and accountability. The organizational roadmap, how it looks and what would be the structure, you can have a look at this here below. This will be headed by the Director General at the Secretariat, supported by the staff officer at the P2 level. Briefly, we have got 2 brief segregations, that is the program and the operation. There will be 2 directors under the programs, that is Director Programs, Director Technology and Innovation. Each of the 2 directors will be supported by 4 staff at P2 and P3 level. Then there will be a operations, which will be headed by the Director Operations, and the Director of Finance and the Resources will be there at the P4, P5 level, and the Director HR and Coordination will be there at the P4, P5 level. The Finance and Resources will be supported by 3 staff of P3, P2 and P3 level, and this will be concentrated mainly on resource mobilization. The functions of administration, HR and coordinations, this will be supported and handled by the locally recruited staff. You can see the 2 positions of DDG at the director level, which is shown at the top below the Director General. This will be filled up subject to the availability of resources in future with the approval of the Standing Committee. As of now, we have planned only for 16 positions, that is 4 directors and 12 at P2, P3 level. Before I conclude, I would also like to introduce our colleague who has been just on board, Mr. Kevin. Kevin Lewis is a senior officer from the international career. He was a UN staff member. During the last 10 years in his UN career, he has served as the head of administration in Yugoslavia. He was in UNICEF in the country office of India at UNFCCC, and he has worked in IRINA, and he has a vast experience in both HR and administration. I would now request Kevin to take over and brief us on the recruitment process of what is planned for these 16 positions. Over to Kevin, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rao. I hope everybody can hear me clearly. First of all, Director General, Mr. Minister, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, and for those of you on the ISIS staff who I haven't met yet, I have to say it's an honor to work with you after having worked with climate, convention and now in arena for the past 3 years, it was a pleasant surprise to start working with you guys. Let me start off the presentation. I'm not going to read each of the slides. There's a lot of information in there, but if you have questions after the presentation or after the video conference is over, please feel free to send to us and we'll try to respond to you. First, I'll say what I'm going to try to do is go through the presentation, but basically to show what we've tried to do is once I was contacted by the Director General and speaking with the Senior Advisor, Mr. Rao, Archana, what we've tried to do is use best practices from various international organizations to try to meet what Mr. Rao put down as the selecting guiding principles for ISA's recruitment process. And again, that's the competitive, objectivity, transparency, diversity, non-discrimination, and accountability. And in putting together a process, we've tried to take all of those into account. As we go through this recruitment process, I'm going to talk to you briefly about the steps that we're putting in place and that we're recommending. We'll go through the steps just briefly. We're going to have various tools to assess the candidates and the applicants who apply for the post. There's going to be 2 separate panels that would be established. That's what we're proposing. One which will be conduct the interviews, the other one which will do a review of the process to make sure that we're doing it appropriately. And with that, what we wanted to do is the last slide that was up there was just a comparison. I think it's the one before that. This was just a comparison. We just wanted to show the staffing levels of ISA versus other organizations and some of the partner organizations of ISA. And so we have the International Solar Alliance, that is going to have approximately 30 staff members. International Renewable Energy Agency, ARENA, right now has 90 what they refer to as their fixed term authorized posts, but they actually have 120 other people on board who are either temporary interns, consultants, or associate professionals. International Energy Agency is about 420 staff. UNFCCC is down to about 450 now. They've gone down dramatically. And then we just threw in OECD as one of the European organizations. They have over 3,000. That's not at their headquarters only, it's also in their field offices. But just as a comparison, next slide, please. Before even starting the recruitment process for any organization, whether you're a national government or an international organization, you have to set up a classification process of, okay, for each level that you're going to establish within your organization, what are the levels, what's the minimum requirement, and what are your educational requirements? And ISA has already done that. It's come up with your basic, how many years of experience at each level, so you can look at a P4. If somebody's being recruited at that level, they should have a minimum of 10 years of experience. If they're being recruited at the P5 level, it goes up to 12. But on this chart, you'll also see we've established some core competencies. The competencies that we'd be looking for people to have skills in being professional, having good communication skills, good leadership skills, and good performance management skills. Again, you can look at this slide presentation afterwards, and if you have any questions, let us know. Next slide, please. ISA has already started a recruitment time frame. And if you look at this, everything from drafting the job descriptions, which we're in the process of doing right now, and classifying the post, all the way down to the informing the selected candidates. We are currently estimating a 21-week period, or 4 months. This is getting us until the end of November by the time individuals have been selected. In fairness, some of this may go faster, in which case you may actually have people informed and possibly even on board by that time. But in the worst case scenario, we're thinking by the end of November, we'd start being in the actual recruitment process. Next slide, please. Before we even start advertising the post, what we're trying to do is do some advanced information. You're going to see that the ISA internet portal or website, there is now going to be an employment site on the page, like in most other international organizations. We've already created an ISA personal history or application form. We're trying to get an online version of it. I'm not guaranteeing that's going to be up and running. We may actually have people submitting applications by sending it by email, just a hard copy or an email version of the form to us, and we go on that basis. If we can do it online before, at any time during this process, we will switch to that. There's going to be an advance notification that may have already gone out to all member states as to the upcoming recruitment exercise, telling that the circulation of the vacancy notices and asking them to distribute it to their nationals. We are reaching out to all the ISIS partner organizations to ask them if they'll also distribute within their networks. We're also liaising right now with all the major international organization recruitment websites, and there's a variety of them, so that as soon as we publish the vacancy announcements, they get distributed worldwide. And then lastly, we're hoping and planning on distributing the vacancy announcements to all the other major energy-related organizations. Next slide, please. Once the advertisements have been posted and once we start receiving applications, we're actually planning right now for vacancy announcement will be advertised for a minimum period of 3 weeks. What we will be doing is as we get close to the end of the 3-week period, we will be checking to make sure that we have enough applications. If we see that for a particular post we're not getting either the right caliber or sufficient number, we may then extend the deadline date for vacancy announcements and redo our efforts at getting more people to apply for the post. Right now it's envisioned that I would actually take on the role of doing the first evaluation of the vacancies when they come in, and we've decided this is a common practice in most organizations. When you do your first review of your applications, you basically divide into 3 categories. There's the C category is for people who don't meet either the minimum qualifications in terms of education or experience, in which case, because they don't meet the requirements, they won't receive further consideration. You have another group who meet the basic minimum education level, maybe the minimum years of work experience. However, their prior work experience might not be relevant or sufficient. And then finally, you have your A group, which are those that meet or exceed all the requirements and appear to have the prior relevant experience. That list will then be sent back to ISA. All the candidates who have applied will all be rated. It will be sent back to ISA itself for verification. Next one. Next slide, please. Okay. I mentioned that we're going to have various tools that we're going to use, and I'll just say really quickly, there's a further description here. There's 3 tools that most organizations, or I won't say most, I'll say a lot of organizations are now using. There is a online pre-recorded interview tool, which is now becoming very popular among organizations. Arena now uses it for all of its posts, where a large number of candidates can be sent 2 or 3 questions via a link. They record an answer, and then the organization gets to review their answers and rate them. Following that method, the ones who are successful from that would go on to take a written examination. A written examination would be to judge their ability, written skills ability, their logical thinking, and their technical knowledge. And it would be from those 2 things that you would finally we'd make the decision of who's going to get a face-to-face interview. And the face-to-face interviews right now are envisioned to be done by video conference. Best practices, they all get asked the same questions, given about the same amount of time for the interview, and the panel members then reach a consensus on the ratings of the candidates at the end of the interview. Okay, next. What we then do, and I can now see that I've got a mistake on my slide. The results of the 3 evaluations, to make this, again, we wanted to have it accountable. You'd make a weighted average of each of the different tools that we use. This says 20, 40, 30. There should probably be 20, 40, 40, but anyway, we pre-assign that beforehand. The top candidates are then ranked according to their final scores, and at this stage, we make reference checks from prior employers so that we can ensure that there's nothing in their background that would stop them from being appointed. And then there'd be a review by an appointment and review panel before it goes to the DG for approval. Next slide, please. Okay, I mentioned, and particularly because it's related to the criteria, the selection criteria, and the whole selection process, that we wanted to be accountable. In most organizations, both your interview panel and your appointment and review panel usually are people from your own organization, but because ISA is just starting up, in both of these situations, the DG may be going to other organizations, say in Delhi, international organizations, finding individuals who are willing to be on the panel at the right appropriate grade and level, and who have experience in the areas that we're looking for. So either program people for the program related post, resource mobilization for the resource mobilization finance post, and admin for the admin post. But one, you would have an interview panel. The interview panel, again, is the one who looks at your scores for the pre-recorded interview, the written test, and the final interview. And the appointment and review panel is something used widely across all the international organizations. That usually is an outside body who just looks at the process that the organization followed, make sure that, and they verify that the organization followed its own rules. And again, this issue of accountability and making sure that we do things properly. And then I think one last slide, please. And this particularly for the distinguished delegates, for those of you who are going to be sending the vacancy announcements back to your home countries to distribute, one of the things we just wanted to make note of is on the vacancy announcements, we are going to have information there about the salaries, how the pension contribution, health insurance, standards of travel, education allowance, and what the benefits are for people who come on board on ISA. It is different from other international organizations. That is going to stop some people from coming over. But in other situations, people coming from many national governments are going to find that the benefits are very fair and very very good for them. And we just want you to let you know that we will be putting them on the vacancy announcements, so they will be available to everybody. And that's the end of the presentation.
Kevin, one more thing you left out, it is the hardship allowance.
Oh yeah, okay, for us there is no hardship allowance. Even though the air pollution in Delhi sometimes is not good, we don't get hardship allowance for
It's like UAE, in Irina also they're not giving.
Well, we'll talk about that later. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Thank you so much, Anna. That was a very helpful and very interesting update, and I can already see comments from our members on this. So I think it's been a very relevant and very topical presentation. So thank you both. Okay. I'd now like to, and perhaps we might leave the questions to the country intervention stage of the discussion, if that is okay with all. And we might move now to Mr. Abhishek Shah, Associate Director at KPMG, who have been supporting the ISA Secretariat on programs. And he will be presenting on indicative financing terms by different financial institutions, a topic that I'm sure is going to be of great interest to many members. Abhishek, would you like to start now?
Yeah, thank you, Fiona. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Sure, thank you. A very good morning to all the dignitaries from ISA member countries, the ISA staff and other participants from different organizations. I'll just start my presentation. The presentation visible?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay. Okay. So I'll just start with this. So the presentation topic is basically what we have done is we have analyzed the different financing terms by some of the key financial institutions in ISA member countries. So this topic has become very important these days, especially in due to the COVID crisis, which has led to major macroeconomic problems across most of our member countries, where there's problem of fiscal deficits, difficulty in accessing finance. While some of the developed countries have lowered their interest rates and infused liquidity, the developing countries still face a lot of issues. Uh, the normal financial institution of these countries are also getting risk averse because of the challenges faced by different organizations and companies. So the role of financial institutions, which was always very important for ISA member countries to access finance for different projects, including solar projects, it has become even more important now. Okay. So we have analyzed some of the key institutions based on their publicly based annual reports to look at what are the different kind of products which are pertinent to solar projects, what are the different kinds of interest rates. A lot of these financial parameters are dynamic in nature. While we have captured the current thing, they change and vary with different institutions. Uh, moving forward, the first institution that we have looked at is the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. It is a relatively new multilateral institution which was founded in 2016. It is headquartered out of Beijing. The policy mandate of the AIIB is sustainable economic development, wealth creation, and improvement of infrastructure, and its primary focus area is Asia. The focus areas is rural infrastructure and the most importantly on energy and power, which is what is pertinent to the ISA member countries. The different kinds of financial instruments that AIB is giving is loans, guarantees, and equity. Uh, what we have, while most of these financial institutions have a wide variety of products, some of them are sovereign loans. There are also a number of instruments for private institutions. We have mostly focused on the sovereign-backed loans and what kind of pricing, tenure, interest rates that they are giving. So AIIB, their loan tenures typically the maximum average maturity rate is 20 years, and the reference rate is LIBOR. Uh, Typically, what AIB is charging is a front end fee of 0.25%. So basically, if you take a loan of 100 rupees or 100 USD, 25 cents is what they charge upfront. Then there is a commitment fee of 0.25% on undisbursed loan balances. This is a yearly fee, okay, which they charge every year on the undisbursed loan balances. And finally, there is the lending spread. These lending spread varies. One is a fixed spread and the other is a variable spread. So coming to this slide, this is the lending spread for the fixed spread loans and the lending spread of the variable spread loans. So lending spread is typically made of four components. One is the contractual lending spread of 0.5%. Then there's a maturity premium. The maturity premium increases with the loan tenures and varies from 0 to 0.5%. Then there is a market risk premium and a projected funding spread to LIBOR. So if you see, if I were to summarize what you see in the table, is that lending spread typically increases with the loan tenure. So up to 8 years, the lending spread will be 0.65% plus the 6-month LIBOR, which increases to 1.4% in a 20-year loan. Coming to the bottom table, if you see, this is the variable spread loan. So the above is a fixed interest loan, while the bottom one shows the variable interest loan. So this interest spread also varies from 0.5% to 1%, depending on the loan tenure. And if you see these two tables, you will see that the fixed spread loans are typically of a higher interest rate compared to a variable loan. This is because the risk for the bank is higher when they are lending on a fixed spread. Moving to the next financial institution that we have looked at is the New Development Bank. Again, a relatively new multilateral financial institution which was founded by the BRICS countries, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. It is based out of Shanghai, and its focus is on mobilization of resources and lending to infrastructure and sustainable development projects in mainly BRICS countries as well as other emerging countries. One important thing to note about the new development bank is that recently the president, Mr. Kamath, has said that 60% of the lending will be to renewable energy projects, which is a very high number. Okay, so typically, if you see the other multilateral financial institutions, they lend between 10 to 20 or 30% to the whole energy and power sector. But NDB is lending 60% to the renewable energy projects alone. Again, the product that they're offering is a variable spread loan, which is based on a 6-month LIBOR. It varies from 0.65% to 1.35% depending on the loan tenure. So it is pretty similar to what the kind of loan and pricing that is being offered by AIIB. Moving forward, Asian Development Bank, which is quite well known because of its large footprint across Asia. So what we have seen from Asian Development Bank is they don't offer fixed spread loans, rather they only offer variable spread loans. And their financing is basically 0.5% over the LIBOR. Okay, and the average loan maturity is between 13 to 16 years, and the loan interest rate increases with the increase in loan tenure. And ADB is also very active in financing renewable energy projects across its member countries. Moving forward, African Development Bank. Most of our African ISA member countries would be familiar with African Development Bank. Here, what we have analyzed and found is that they don't offer, fixed credit spreads over the LIBOR rate. Rather, they have an interest rate which is quite flexible, depending on the borrower and the maturity of the loan and the grace period. So it's more done on a bilateral basis, the pricing of the loan. They offer tenures which is much higher than the other banks. So AFDF, they have a product on an AFDF loan which has a maturity of as high as 40 years with a grace period of 5 to 10 years. And the rate is zero for this kind of product with a 0.75% service charge. They also have a flexible variable loan, which is based on a sovereign guarantee. Their focus areas are also infrastructure, regional integration, private sector development, and they mainly focus on the Africa. Moving forward, we have also analyzed the International Development Association. So this is a World Bank offshoot. Their policy mandate is to promotion of economic development, increasing productivity and standards of living in less developed areas of the world. So while the banks that I described above were more focused in terms of geography in Asia and Africa, IDA has a much wider footprint, and they lend across Asia, Africa, the Pacific, Europe, and Central Asia. So if you look, they have different categories of loans. So for smaller economies, they have a higher maturity and a higher grace period and easier principal repayments, while for regular economies, they have a smaller maturity period and so on. So that is coming forward. They also, like the AIB, offer both fixed spread loans as well as variable spread loans. Again, their interest rates increases with the loan tenure varying from 0.65% to 1.4%, and the variable spreads moving from 0.5 to 1%. So if you look across, while we have analyzed all these different institutions, more or less their products and the interest rates are more or less in the similar range. Another World Bank offshoot that we looked at was the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, IBRD. So their mandate is in reconstruction and development of member territories by facilitating capital investment. They have different kinds of products depending on the different kinds of categories of countries. The most lowest price products is for the fragile and conflict affected countries, where their product varies from a LIBOR plus 0.65% to LIBOR 1.4%, while for the higher income countries, they have a higher price loan, which varies from LIBOR plus 0.7 to LIBOR plus 2%. Again, they, like the other banks, they have a front end fee and a commitment fee for every year. Again, a product which is similar to what the other banks are giving. So I'll skip this slide, which is on the variable spreads. This is the last bank that we analyzed, which is the Exim Bank. So while Exim Bank has two key products, one is the lines of credit and one of the buyer's credit. We have basically in this slide, for the interest of the time, we just looked at the lines of credit. So they have three categories of lines of credit that they give. One is on the maturity of 25 years with a moratorium of 5 years and an interest rate of 1.5%, which is fixed. This is for least and middle income countries with minimum binding concession requirement as per IMF. The second category has a slightly higher interest rate of 1.75% with a lower maturity of 20 years. While for other developing countries, they have a product which has 15-year maturity with a LIBOR plus 1.5%. For more details on Exim Bank, their products, we also have a representative from the Exim Bank who will be presenting later in this session. And so you can direct questions directly to the Exim Bank representative. This completes my presentation. So if you have any questions, this presentation will be shared to all the members. If you have any questions, please redirect it to us. We will be happy to answer them. And if there are any details required, we will be directly contacting the representative of the bank and getting you the information. That is all from me. Fiona, back to you.
Thank you so much, Abhishek. Unfortunately, Exim Bank is unable to join us today, but I'm sure my colleagues would be able to put any interested members in touch with Exim Bank directly. I'd now like to invite my colleague, known to many of you, I'm sure, Mr. Rajiv Kiani, Associate Director at ISA, to discuss financing for solar pumps, as well as the challenges associated with this issue. Rajiv?
Thank you, Fiona. I hope I am audible and clear.
Yes, Rajiv. Clear.
Thank you. Thank you, Excellencies, and all the participants of this Sun Meet. It's my pleasure to present to you about the financing part of solar pumping system and the challenges which we have faced during the implementation and in process of the solar pumping program. I would request Mr. Bimal to put on the presentation, please. Few of the slides you might feel that these are repetitions, but to make the connection to the subsequent slide, these were necessary, so I have used this. As you're all aware, there are 6 programs. I'll be talking specifically on the first program, that is scaling of solar application for agriculture use, wherein this solar pump is included. Next. So about this solar pumping program, the things have been repeatedly conveyed to all dignitaries, but especially I'll speak that based on the demand aggregation process which ISA has processed, and the countries who have submitted a demand for the larger solar pumps, it was decided under the guidance of Director General that the ISA expert team should go and visit these countries to assess the need of their particular countries. So 9 countries were visited during this period till August 2019. and many good results we have come across. This was based on the international competitive bid which ISA had done with the help of Energy Efficiency Services Limited. And the results, the discovery of the rates through this international competitive bid were very, very encouraging. So this is a nutshell of the demand aggregation of solar water pumping system which we received from 22 ISA member country. And if we categorize these 22 countries, maximum of these were from Africa region, 14 countries with a demand of about 256,000. Why I am emphasizing this thing? Because now the financing we need for this thing should be focused on these countries mainly, but we cannot minimize the possibility in the Asia Pacific countries and LAC countries. Now I would like to specially mention here as this demand was accumulated till the deadline of December 2018, and after that the competitive bid was held. So if you see very clearly, the message has gone to the world that there is a demand of more than 272,000 solar pumps across these 22 countries at least. And with the estimated total project cost, which is broadly estimated, is more than 1,312 US million dollar. Now the specific reason for putting up the capacity of the solar pump is that because there are a few countries who have demand of 100 pumps each, but the cost of the project varies, and this is because the difference in the capacities in those countries. And the cost which has been mentioned here is the average cost of the 4 categories of each pump discovered through the international competitive bid. Next slide. Now, to achieve this particular state, it was a big exercise. It started with the need assessment, with the collaboration with the national focal point and very good support and guidance from the contact points of respective countries. And based on this needs assessment, we ascertained the demand of these particular countries. For that, I have already spoken that the visits were made to these countries, not only to understand demand, but also to see what can be the financial model in these countries. For that, we also visited the financial institutions which were present in those countries, including World Bank, AFD, and African Development Bank. Then these demand aggregations were validated with due discussion with the respective authorities, and the international competitive bid held based on this. Next, please. Now the demand aggregation has further step for country strategy, which we are already in process of doing so through regular interventions and bilateral meetings through video conferencing, and then facilitating the deployment of standards, performance benchmarking costs through such type of bidding. And we also try to create a platform for testing and certification to the future prospects of the Starship centers in those respective regions. Now the outreach, just like the Sun Meet, we also have plans. The seminars are there, and we also have planned to have special seminars to the financial institutions so that we come out with some good financial solutions for this solar pumping financing. Next. Next, please. Now, I cannot cover all the countries together. So specifically, we have considered 5 case studies wherein we have some information about the solar financing through bilateral interventions and through the online access. Now here, Sudan, Bangladesh, India, Senegal, and Tonga. These are the 5 countries which I would be presenting in a nutshell what are their solar installations, solar pump installation is of now, and what model they have adopted. Next. So to start with the Sudan, though the expert team couldn't visit Sudan as of now, but the national focal point is very proactive, and he has informed lot many information regarding the prevailing projects in that countries. Now this clearly indicates that in the country there are 96% of pumps are based on diesel and only 4% are still are working on solar pumps. So not more than 150 pumps out of 3640 pumps of irrigation available in that country are solar based. So they have given the demand for 50,000 number of solar pumps. So as per the technical analysis of UNDP, the major portion of in capacity wise is acquired by 8 HP pump, which has 60% space in this per total demand. So we assume that this would be the demand for 50,000 pump as well if we go for the financing of this pump. And there is a very wonderful word which is muraba. Muraba is a common system adopted by the Islamic banking credit lending system, and which is prevailing there, wherein the consumer and the lender, they both are aware what is the status, because this is the cost of the product plus the profit, and it is paid in installment. So we are in line with Sudan to how to finance these 50,000 pumps which they are really desiring to stop. So this is one of the case study of Sudan. Second, next, Bangladesh is a very wonderful model. Most of the countries are aware about this thing, and we have been specifically quoting this type of model to be adopted in most of the countries. Now, IDCOL, that is Infrastructure Development Company Limited, is the agency which has implemented this program in Bangladesh. Now, they have two models. One is ownership model and another is fee for service model. In these two structures, if you see, it seems similar, but the only difference is that the ownership of the solar pump, which is financed through IDCOL to the sponsor, now ownership is of service provider, where fee for service model is applicable, and ownership is with the farmer, where the ownership model is applicable. So these two models are prevailing there and successfully being operational since last few years. And in this particular case, the things are visible through their website also. The IDCOL websites has clear explanation of all these things and the prevailing schemes connected to this. Next. India is the country which has the largest solar pumping program in the world as of now. And because of that, the good experience of the already installed solar pump, the government of India has come up with the Kusum scheme, which is Kisan Urja Suraksha Evam Utthan Mahabhiyan, through which they have a target for solarizing India's 30 million agriculture pumps. Now, there are three categories, components in this scheme, wherein B and C components covers the solar pumps. Now, specifically, component B covers the standalone solar agriculture pump, and the target is 17.5 lakhs. That is 1.75 million solar pumps. And recently, MNRE, the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy of Government of India, has floated a tender for 175,000 solar pumps through EESL. And they have achieved the state-wise and different category-wise rates of the solar pumps. This scaling up and doing the bidding is one of the example which other countries can also adopt. ISA is there to help all these countries for doing so, because scaling up is one of the vision of ISA. So they have achieved a very good price and they are working on it. Now, the model which Government of India is adopting is very simple. Government of India says that they will provide 30% subsidy to the farmer, provided 30% additional is provided by the state government. So out of 100, 60% subsidy is provided through state government and the central government. Now, the state government has their own independent authority to make further plan for how to implement this program. So, but in most of the states, it has been concluded that not more than 10% cost should be borne by the farmer. So the balance 30% again is probably loan from the NABARD, that is National Bank for Agriculture and Rural Development, which is working out fantastically. And the things are moving and satisfied results are there. Next. Senegal is one of the very good example, though not in the large scale. The expert team of ISA had visited Senegal in 2019, October 2019, wherein they visited one solar pump of 2 HP, which was among one of the 100 solar water pumping system installed in Senegal through the nodal agency, that is ENER, which is responsible for the implementation of solar projects in Senegal. Now these 100 solar pumps were installed to the financing agency, which is a local bank, Agricole Bank, and this Agricole Bank was supported by Senegal government through the financial assistance of AFD, and the financing was done to the farmers at the rate of 5%. Now the important point here is that the risk mitigation was the key issue here, where the FONGIP is one of the financial institution of government of Senegal, which has taken the risk for all these 100 pumps. Now they have submitted demand of 4,000 pump. ISA is again bilaterally having meeting with the AFD. I think the AFD officials are also there in Sunmeet. So we will be moving ahead for the similar pattern to be adopted for financing of 4,000 pumps. Now last example is of Tonga. Tonga is very proactive country so far as the solar pump is required, and they have been regularly giving us good feedbacks and information about the demand of 258 pumps which they had submitted to ISA. Now this 258 pumps is a very small amount, but the country, with respect to country, it is a good number, and we have categorized that these total number of pumps will be divided into 4 categories as submitted, the information submitted by the country, and we are working on it, how the financing of these particular pumps can be done. Initially, there were only 43 pumps which were already installed in this Tonga, wherein the operations are successful and they are satisfied, and that is the reason they want to expand this thing. So these are the 5 cases which I have shared with you. Now, what are the challenges here? What are the different types of problems which can arise? Next slide, please. See, there are 3 cases we can consider. One is the capital subsidy case, in which the instrument is adopted by Government of India, when the subsidy is provided by the central and state government. The advantage of this is that direct address high upfront capital cost and could potentially reach all types of farmers, and the ease of implementation and low transaction cost from the government perspective without the need of continued operating system. But there are some shortcomings which we can envisage, though these are the things which we have presumed, that high subsidy burden for each pump deployment will be there, transaction costs for end users in assessing subsidies will be there, possibility, it is not necessary, but there is possibility of not reaching the targeted economic groups. Now, in case of long-term credit, wherein there is no capital subsidy, the concessional financing debt option are provided to the farmers. Now, the advantage is that design can be tailored to local economic conditions, that is down payment and payback options can be customized with respect to the need of the country. Then incentive to continue operating the system, unit costs are fully recovered, and deployment may be slower, but supports sustainable market development. And the shortcoming which we feel that can be that there is a spread risk of capital recovery over a long time period. Then long-term budgetary commitment has to be there, requires access to financial institution, and may require inhibiting collateral requirements and hence possibility of not reaching the targeted economic growth. Now, apart from these 2, financial incentives is also possible in all the cases wherein there could be exemption from VAT and the custom duty. This financial institution can be part of the capital subsidy and long-term credit, but individually also the country can adopt these things. Next. Now, if we see the total solar pumping program, it can be categorized basically into three parts. First is the off-grid part, second is the grid-connected part, and third, wherein community irrigation, which can cover on-grid as well as off-grid project. Now, off-grid has 2 sections. One is the new installation, where there is no pump and new pump has to be installed. That will be off-grid new installation. Now, second off-grid will be it can be replacement of diesel pumps, which we are catering as of now, and most of the countries need these type of pumps where replacement of diesel pumps are there. And second is on-grid pump, where the pumps were already operating through electricity and they need to solarize that pumps or replace the pump with the solar pumps. Now, for off-grid applications, the challenges in financing is that penetration of the organized financing is very low in remote location, and hence few options for the consumers or rather farmers. Then income security or off-grid solar water pumping system is low due to high dependency on seasonal crop yield. Then high risk profile and typical no assets to offer as collateral for the local banks probably. And then bank official at the local level may not like to take risk to lend this to consumers. Now on-grid system, normally in these areas, the electricity provided to the farmers are subsidized. So there is a fear of misuse of solar assets with availability of grid power to run water pump, and default risk in getting access to subsidized electricity. Means overuse of the subsidized electricity. Now it depends upon the policy and what update. Now this again applies same for community irrigation system, wherein lack of awareness among rural population to develop community-based irrigation methods are there, and high transaction costs for coordinating among farmer communities. Now, how to address these challenges? I would like to specifically mention that the demand aggregation of 272,000 solar pump is a visible figure. Is a visible figure for all the countries, for all the manufacturers, for all the financial institutions, and this is the potential minimum of minimum, and that too only for 22 countries. Now we have 193 countries, so there is a huge potential of solar pumps. Now, apart from this, if we feel that the financing is possible, so the challenge is to bring all the stakeholders on a single platform: financing agencies, manufacturers, sovereign government, and other donors, etc., which can make this program viable financially. So creating innovative business model to enhance reach to small and marginal farmer is a challenge. Then providing access to bridge finance to address risk related to delay in subsidy disbursal, availability of working capital term loans, access to collateral free loans, and availability of risk mitigation facility. Now, these are the three models which we like to introduce to all the countries who have interested, wherein individual farmers want to take the loan. Here in this case, the financing is done either to some financial institution or MDB to the member country with a sovereign guarantee, and this is further passed to an intermediary bank for member country, which further passes down to farmer with the help of risk guarantee from the third party. Similar, next. I'm moving fast because the time is less. Now, similarly, in this case also, where the community irrigation or entrepreneur is there for financing, the system will remain same. The private farmers will be replaced by the entrepreneurs, and the model will remain same. Next. And the third model is there where the grid connected solar pumps are involved. System will be same, only the power utilities will also be involved in this case. In case there is some subsidy scheme or where the power is subsidized, so that incentive can be synchronized with the prevailing schemes. Next. Thank you very much. I was very fast, I'm sorry, but the time was moving fast. So any questions later on will be addressed. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rajiv. We very much appreciate the presentation and you sticking to the timeframes. Thank you. Next, and continuing on the theme of finance, I would be delighted to please call upon Mr. Amit Jain, a senior energy specialist at the World Bank, to present on the Solar Risk Mitigation Initiative, mentioned earlier by my colleague Jagjeet, and in particular the experience with using that initiative in the Maldives. Amit?
Thank you, Fiona. Can you hear me? Can you see the presentation?
Yes, on both counts.
Thank you, Fiona. Good afternoon, DG, Secretary MNRE, distinguished guests. Let me first start from what Kevin mentioned in terms of the hardship allowance in Delhi because of air pollution. So, Kevin, let me tell you, in the last 3 months, there was no air pollution and the ppm levels were down to 50. So if we all take a pledge of a green recovery in several countries including India, we probably don't need hardship allowance in any country. And if you don't believe me, let me give you some examples where some countries have used this time of crisis to bring about reforms, innovations in the power sector. Starting with Germany, you might know that they have brought about a huge multi-billion-dollar green stimulus promoting hydrogen fuel. Korea has launched $700 million of green bonds, and India has released draft Electricity Amendment Act looking at major power sector reforms in the country. The point is, maybe we can use this crisis time to bring some green changes across transportation and across the power sector. But today, ladies and gentlemen, we will focus on Maldives, how Maldives government is taking a pledge and using this opportunity to move from diesel to solar and storage. I know we will be taking questions in the end, Fiona, but as I usually do, you have my Twitter account on the front page. I'll be happy to answer any questions if we are not able to address during this presentation. So, Solar Risk Mitigation Initiative was a concept developed and founded by ISA in year 2018. At that point of time, it was called CRMM. World Bank, in partnership with ISA, AFD, and IRENA, took the concept forward to a design stage in the year 2009. And this year, we have 3 active projects currently operating under this initiative. We will discuss about Maldives. We have ROGEP program in Africa. And recently, we have applied to GCF for $400 million in 10 countries. So if you look at the history of SRMI, it has moved from a conceptual stage to operational stage in year 2020, mobilizing more than $700 million from climate finance. In this presentation, DG, I will be focusing mainly on the small island countries like Maldives, because these are the countries which are most hit by COVID. Although all the countries' economy and GDP has been hit, but countries like Maldives are hit even in a harder way. Let me explain how. Island countries are mostly dependent on tourism and also on diesel import. For example, 20 to 25% of GDP of Maldives is dependent on tourism, which has been completely dead for the last quarter. Now, Maldives will be opening on 1st of July, but we will see the next 2-3 quarters will be very slow for island countries like Maldives, Seychelles. This has further put the condition of utilities and discoms in these countries in a more precarious situation. The utilities will be more and more dependent on subsidies from the government, which are not going to be easy because government will be focused on health and other infrastructure projects. Utilities will not be able to increase tariff in these difficult times. We have also observed that in island countries, the collection efficiency has fallen more than 50%. So they are going to be really red in the coming quarters for most of the utilities in these island countries. As I mentioned, Maldives is using this time to replace diesel with renewables in this time of crisis, and we are working for $100 million project with Maldives on that, based on Solar Risk Mitigation Initiative. Maldives is a beautiful country with more than 1,192 islands, highly dependent on tourism, which will be severely hit, and it spends more than 1% of its GDP on fuel and electricity subsidies. If you look at 2019, 8% of the GDP was just on the fuel import bill of diesel in that country. This is a case study for Maldives, but this is true for almost all the small island countries. While, as I mentioned briefly before, while the contraction of economy is going to a global level, we are expecting 3 to 4% contraction in the global economy, but Maldives is going to contract by more than 13%, which is huge for a very small country like Maldives. Now, the biggest challenge the country is going to face is mobilization of private sector investment. This is not only true for renewables, this is true for all infrastructure projects like highways or transportation or buses, because private sector is now going to be very cautious when they're going to bid or invest in the countries where the economy is very small and they are remote islands. There are two or three reasons for that. When a private sector bid in a country, they want the returns to be in a timely and a reliable fashion. So they put the country risk at the top. Is the country credible enough where the payments will be made to the private sector back in time? So this is called country risk. Second is utility risk. When they sign the PPA with a discom or a utility, do the credit history or the cash flows of the utility and discom is credible enough where they get the PPA payments in delays? Thirdly, can they take back their investment back? If they are investing in Maldives in Maldivian rupiah, can they take the investment back in dollars? So these are the two or three risks which are very typical to island countries. And under the SRMI program, we have tried to take care of this risk with the following financing structure. The first pillar of the SRMI in Maldives is the World Bank guarantee in the form of MIGA or IDA for PPA termination risk. What does it mean? In case of any emergency, for example for COVID, if the government of Maldives or the utility refuses to pay the private sector, the World Bank guarantee will kick in. MIGA is a World Bank instrument which covers up to 95% of termination risk. It includes the country risk as well. IDA covers 80% and requires sovereign guarantee, but is much cheaper than MIGA. So termination risk was covered in Maldives through this IDA guarantees in the 5 megawatt program, which we discussed. Secondly, we also created a funded facility called escrow account in Maldives, where 6 months of funds were already kept in this escrow account, both by Government of Maldives and by the World Bank grant. So what we are saying to the private sector is, even if there's a delay for 6 months, this fund is there exclusively for you to withdraw payments in case there's a delay from the utilities or the discoms. Then we also made a provision after discussion with the Government of Maldives where the investment from private sector can be taken back to their own country in dollars or whatever currency they want to. There was also a tariff buy-down component to decrease the capital cost of solar in Maldives, because as we know, small countries with no economies of scale, the capex of solar or storage is much higher in these island countries than in large economies or large countries. So these 4-tier structures were able to bring the cost down for a solar PPA dramatically in the last 2-3 years. 3 years back, we have a program in Maldives which was signed at 21 cents. But this year, Maldives is going to sign a project at 10.9 cents. A dramatic fall of 50% in the PPA because of these clauses, what we mentioned above. As I mentioned, this project is now going to be signed very soon, and this SRMI initiative is operational in Maldives. It attracted more than 32 private investors, out of which final one was selected, and we are in discussion with IFC as well to give debt to the selected player. SRMI is not only limited to financing, it is also associated with enabling environment in the form of technical assistance and also a robust procurement and tendering criteria, which we followed in Maldives. Now look at the journey what Maldives has taken in the last 3 years. From a totally grant-based project, we moved to Aspire, a program where we have the 4-tier structure, including guarantees, which I explained to you in the last slide. Now, with the help of Government of Maldives, we are working on a new program, a $86 million program called Arise, which has mobilized or which will mobilize financing from AIIB, Canadian Trust Fund, Italian Development Bank, and many other climate finance like CTF. We are very closely working with Maldives on the SRMI concept, where they have launched a new tender of 21 megawatt, which is the largest tender by Maldives ever, which includes 11 megawatts of floating solar. This is also more or less based on the 4-tier structure explained in our last slide, and this tender is already online. In the new program under SRMI initiative, we are not only stopping at solar PV, it also includes large-scale battery installations, grid upgradation, and a technical systems program to prepare an ecosystem for a complete power sector reform for the Maldives. Let me end my slide by showing you a beautiful video of Maldives when the government released this tender program on 21 megawatts of Maldives.
We don't yet have the video playing, Amit.
I'm sorry, can you see the video or not?
No, Amit, it's still on the annexes slide.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. Let me change that.
No worries.
Can you see it now?
No, we're still just on your PowerPoint screen.
Okay. Okay, how about now?
Not just yet. Your screen's unfortunately disappeared altogether, Amit. Oh, this looks like this could be something.
Now it will.
Yes, excellent. Thank you. But no sound just yet.
Amit, there is no noise over here.
Okay. Maybe you can just see that exact sites have been identified for both for floating solar and solar rooftop, the 6 atolls in Maldives. This includes the floating solar site in the southernmost islands called Pomula, which is famous for tiger sharks. 10 megawatt floating solar is being planned. Right now you see solar rooftop project only working full knowledge.
Amit, I think we might have lost the sound.
Right. Let me just end by just saying that to DG that this tender of 21 megawatt has been launched. I will share the link, DG, with you and Fiona. Any prospective developers all across the world are invited to bid for this new innovative both of floating and solar roof. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Amit. And as usual, a very interesting and very insightful presentation. As the Director General flagged earlier, Dr. Philippe Malbranche, formerly the head of the French National Institute of Solar Energy, has joined us at the ISA Secretariat as the Director of Programs. And we're most delighted that he's able to give us an update on some of the recent discussions and the recent engagements that the ISA has been having with our members during this COVID time. Philippe?
Yes, good morning, Fiona. Thank you.
Pleasure.
And I'm just trying to put my slide online. Let me. I think it should be okay now. Is my presentation visible?
Yes, it is visible.
Yes, it is visible.
Okay. So, good morning, good afternoon to all of you. I'm going to make this update on all the video conferences we had with member countries. You know that the world situation, I will be very brief on the climate and sustainability crisis. And in addition to that, we have just entered in this COVID-19 crisis. And the main consequences so far is a travel freeze, travel ban in many countries, which result in no more meetings, no more expert mission, no more NFP conclave, as one was planned in Africa a few months ago. Training sessions abroad are limited, etc., etc. So then we needed to transition to different organizations. That's how we decided to set up this series of. We made several decisions. First was the nomination of regional directors, but more important is nomination of country coordinator to maintain close relationships, close contacts with member countries. So we have a whole list of, and 20, let's say 20 ISA officers are now responsible on average of 3 to 4 member countries. Mr. Rajiv Gayani, who was talking previously about solar pumps, is still the NFP coordinator, but in addition to him, this country coordinator is responsible for maintaining these contacts with countries. First decision. And second decision made was to organize a series of video conferences as a way to really exchange information. First, to be updated by the NFP about the current situation, the existing situation in the member country. What was happening with the ongoing project, what are the expectations of the country, the priorities, the roadmaps, etc. That's information in one direction, and the second flow of information is the update by all the ISA officers regarding ISA activities, ISA programs, ISA objectives, and resulting from this exchange of information, the definition of future activities. In addition to that, we will also increase some of our online services, but this I will talk about that a bit later. Next slide. So, when did it start? It all started end of March, beginning of April. We decided, as there was an African conclave scheduled, we decided to start this series of video conferences on the African countries. Simultaneous translation is available when it is requested. And in each of these video conferencing, on average, we are around 20 people. We have the participation of all the local team, of course, the national focal points and his or her colleagues from Ministry of Energy, Department of Energy, Rural Electrification Agency, or whatever. And on the ISA side, of course, ISA DG is there, the advisor, directors, officers, and the country coordinator are all attending. And on request, we have also additional partners like NTPC, Multilateral Development Bank, World Bank, Exim Bank, ADB, AFD, etc. As I said, we started focusing on African countries, so end of March, April, we started with Nauru, not an African country, but that was scheduled as such, and then Mali, Togo, Malawi, Senegal, Niger, Benin, Sri Lanka, etc. Until recently, the last one was Djibouti, and then we are planning end of June, July and August, Latin America and Caribbean countries, and then Asia and Pacific countries. Next slide. So how is it organized? You know, the main topic on the agenda are the introduction by ISA DG. Then we have this, we have two main parts. One part is the discussion about the current situation in the member country. And second part is the overview of the ISA programs. So first, a general presentation of the ISA theory of change. And then on request, it depends, it's according to the priorities of the country. So far, we generally made presentation about the solar water pumping program, the aggregation program as was presented by Rajiv Gayani, solar park, most of the time. And on request, we have been addressing also solar cooling activities. If relevant, if the time is available, we can address additional topics like e-mobility, mini-grids, all the other program, you know, solar home system, etc., or discuss about additional activities. Here is another example of course, we can discuss about more recent news, what will happen in the next General Assembly in October, updating the solar roadmaps and increasing the NDCs of countries, discussion about Freedom Solar Parks, training session which are planned as soon as travel freeze will be over. We can discuss also about the ISA Cares or ISA Cools initiatives. What have been the main outcomes so far? This initiative is really well appreciated. It really facilitates the flow of information. We can get direct feedback and creating like a teamwork. And by that we are able to have a more detailed assessment of the current situation in the country. We can identify the existing barriers, what has been the follow-up of ongoing projects, like for the solar water pumping or solar parks. That was very often on the top of the agenda. A decision was made to organize investment seminars in some countries. Very often the duration, the schedule planned for this meeting was too short, so it has triggered new follow-up session for this country, for Comoros, Djibouti, Nigeria, Senegal. It has triggered ongoing discussion. And now, most of the time, it was scheduled for 1 hour or 1 hour and a half, but most of the time now it has to be scheduled for 2 hours. Last slide. It's this has been done in a way to organize, to increase the flow of information, and we are planning also additional services. It's not yet fully operational, but it will come in the coming weeks in order to multiply links and opportunities for discussion. We will collect case studies through an online questionnaire. We will gather good or poor practices that are being used, and all this is made in order to still complement all the information already available in Infopedia with a database of case study and guidelines. It could be technical guidelines, regulatory framework, project management process, etc. And all these activities, almost all we are doing here at ISA, is always aiming at contributing to setting up of project. And with that, I'm finishing my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Lee. It's been really wonderful to have this opportunity in this time to really focus on our engagement with our members. And as you say, to think about what comes next in terms of how we can better support our members and the services that we can provide online to ensure that the distance between us doesn't impact the service and the support that we provide. I'd now like to hand over to Mr. Sunil Wadhwa, a technical member of the expert group of ISA, to discuss bankable off-grid business models. Mr. Wadhwa?
Thank you. Can someone load my slides, please? Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, Mr. Wadhwa, give me a moment.
While I wait for that, I think my slides are, I've got 11 slides and I'll try to do within the 10 minutes allotted to me. And the 3 slides which basically talk about the model, I don't think I need to talk more about the model that in this audience everyone knows about what is off-grid and why. But quickly, if you can flip through slide 1, 2, and 3, just half a minute each. Yeah, please. The background is that we have large population of the world still unserved. It's about over 1 billion people who are not at all connected. And the reasons vary from region to region, such as distance from the grid. Grid extension is too expensive vis-a-vis the demand which is served from the grid extension to these areas which are far-flung. And in some cases, lack of adequate supply also is a reason. Yeah, next. The good news is that renewable costs have fallen drastically, and I say why I say good news, because the thermal power, though was available, couldn't reach the customers without a transmission line being laid till the end. Whereas the renewable can actually reach where it is, where the load center is, and therefore the decentralized. Just get back to the previous slide. So what I have in mind is a decentralized off-grid renewable generation as well as distribution franchisee, which presents a solution to this problem. Next, please. Case for DGT is the quickest way to supply power to the unserved consumers, accelerates the positive socio-economic impacts that arise generally from the access to electricity. It reduces the transmission losses in a big way. Carbon footprint reduction, I don't need to speak about it. Much lower cost of the system versus the grid extension option of providing access to far-off areas. There is a study done by World Bank Group for Powering Africa, which says that for 100,000 consumers, if they are not at all connected to power, it takes about $3 to $4 million to actually give them the basic energy needs, which could be say 8 to 10 hours a day. But if a full system extension was to take place, it can be $150 million. So the cost of off-grid is as low as 50 times versus extending the grid to those far-flung areas. Next, please. Now, I think this is important. What are the challenges with this model? The dichotomy is that the cost of service of the distributed generation distribution is much higher than the average retail tariff of the domestic category of consumers in the served areas. Often, what happens is that the tariffs in most of the countries that we are really contemplating are social tariff structures, where the cost to serve principles are not taken into account. There are cross subsidies. So, if a consumer in a far off area was to get a service from a DGD on a full cost basis, he'll end up paying 5 times what his cousin sitting in the city would be paying. So that's one issue in the DGT model. On the other hand, if the state utility was to extend the grid, the incremental costs would be much higher than the DGT cost of service. As I just said, 3 versus $150 million. So that is one thing which needs to be tackled in the model itself, so that it becomes palatable for the consumers in those areas who actually deserve to be charged the lowest ever tariff. The other side is the risk of the DGT getting stranded if and when the future grid extensions take place, where the grid power will then connect it to the consumers, and the payback period of this DGT may not have been actually achieved by that time. So these two challenges, if we are able to resolve, I think the solution lies there. Next slide, please. So the model that I have in mind is a tripartite model. This is one variation of the model, but basically it will be a model between the served consumer on one hand, the utility which actually have a universal supply obligation toward these consumers, and in between the DGT franchisee. Next, please. So this is a model, typical model that can be followed. In the case of India, this was discussed by the Regulatory Commission at the central level and also with the Forum of Regulators. And we did even find that the Attorney General of India blessed us with the approval that this model actually was allowed within the Indian Electricity Act. That's just an example. It doesn't really mean much for countries where it may not be required to comply with. What it could actually do is the state can follow a competitive bidding or a feed-in tariff route. Most probably the competitive bidding would be better because each area would be different in terms of its composition. The scope of the franchising would be all-inclusive, that is generation of power, setting up and maintenance of distribution network, billing, collection, customer service, including commercial and supply issues, operations to comply with safety and service level standards. And so this would be all inclusive, as if it's a small discom operating in a particular area which is not connected, including the generation of power within that area. There have to be a universal supply obligation in the area contracted, which means that all consumers in that area will have a right to get connection. State to select the specific areas to be served by the private sector DGT franchises. This could be based on whatever criteria that the state wants to have, whether it's political considerations or whether it is the economic considerations. And each area would have a very specific cost to serve, depending on the solar radiation, population extent, density, area to be served, growth potential, level of affluence, etc., and any specific tender conditions which could be of minimum number of hours of supply, which would therefore need some sort of a storage. Yeah, next please. Now the model envisages two tier or two segmental tariffs. One could be the tariff which the state wants the consumers of that area to pay. And ideally, if there is a tariff for that category of consumers prevailing in the entire state, the government really should look at that as a tariff to be charged by the DGT to the consumers in that area. However, the cost of the full operation of DGT would be much higher. So the balance tariff is what would be the bid evaluation criteria, which could either be payable by the state or the state utility on a ongoing basis, along with monthly bills, based on the number of units supplied by the DGT to the consumers, or a part of it could also be a lump sum amount which could be discounted at some rate, and an NPV, net present value basis, could be the basis for selection of the contractor. Next, please. Now, in this tripartite model, it is really a franchisee who is working on the behalf of the utility agent. So all the carbon credits or renewable energy credits, whichever way it is applicable in that particular state, and that's what I propose. And there has to be a sovereign guarantee or a revolving credit for the balance tariff, which is by the state or the utility. This is one part which actually I think Amit also alluded on his model for Maldives, and this is the crux of the bankability part of the model. Now, challenges, as I mentioned, there were two challenges. One was the cost being high compared to what the palatability of the tariff is. Other is if the state utility reaches in that area at a subsequent date, what happens to the generation and the distribution franchisee. So here, this kind of a franchisee would actually be resolving that kind of a issue by saying that when the grid reaches that area, the contract will continue. Only thing which will actually happen is that the generation of renewable by the DGT would get injected into the main grid, and and thereafter the entire amount will be payable by the utility, and the distribution operations will continue to be performed by the DGT. So this in a way makes the DGT look at the tariff based on a payback period of the entire 25 years, rather than worrying on the risk that after 10 years, what happens if the grid comes in and they were trying to squeeze the entire investment amortization in a shorter period. So that in nutshell is the crux of the whole model. Please, next. Now the bankability part, as I said, why it is bankable. One would be if the CT, which is the consumer tariff, is palatable, and there will be very, very low incentive for the consumers to default, because they would be actually saving a lot of money compared to what it would be today when they use kerosene and diesel and stuff like that. So if it is in the range of what the other consumers in the state pay, where it is being served, I think the tariff being low would actually be a big factor for the AT&C loss in that area and the collection efficiencies being high. And this I am saying from my own experience, having run the Delhi Discom for 10 years, where the social tariff structure was one of the reasons for the consumers in the slums to be paying at the collection efficiency going as high as 90%. And there were some linkages of payment to some subsidies. Those are variations one can build subsequently. Community also will emotionally work for the success of this low-cost DGT, given the immediate socio-economic value adds that it brings to them. They will actually be a part of the whole team to manage this show, and we've done that successfully many times in the past. In case of, for example, biomass projects, where we said all the farmers will get power if the plant is operating. So there will be an emotional community attachment with this particular project of the community. Major part of revenue, which is the balance tariff, would come from the state or the utility with payment securities, and no risk of standing, as I mentioned. So this is where the bankability part really comes in, and I think the Maldives model which was given by Amit, in the previous slides, would actually be also quite useful in really understanding that whether this makes it bankable or not. Next, please. What is the business case for the state? It improves the quality of life of the community. Now, this is a compelling case for the political system. Imagine if a political leader has to make a statement in an assembly or in a speech saying, "I'm going to get all of you power in 1 year's time at as low as what your friends in the cities pay." That would be a very compelling case for any political leader to sort of subscribe to. Again, just to kind of make the list complete, there is immediate increase in the state GDP, because the activity which one gets one can expect to happen with the excess of electricity is endless list of add-ons to the GDP. There is a huge saving in terms of the upfront grid extension cost for the state, and this doesn't mean that the state has no option subsequently when the demand picks up in that area to extend the grid, but you really do not need to immediately spend that kind of money on the grid extension, and there is quick access to the unserved population at no upfront cost. This goes without saying. Next, please. There could be one alternate model, and I had some feedback on this also, that instead of a single DGT model, there could be two parts of it. Both can be taken by the same agency, or it could be a separate agency where there could be one 25-year PPA for the generation and supply of power to that area, and along with that, a 10 to 15-year distribution franchisee. A 25-year PPA with the IPP and the state utility will continue despite grid extension, and the distribution franchisee shall operate the distribution network and perform the commercial functions of billing, collection, and network, and so on. So both these models are possible. Depends on the appetite of the investors and the expectation of the utility to take the grid to that area within the next 25 years. So that's the model that I have in mind. And essentially what it means is that if the investments are protected and the utility ends up spending whatever it has to spend on an OPEX model over a 25 years time frame in providing access to the areas which are unconnected, and still has the option to extend the grid at subsequent stage, and the consumers get to pay what is reasonable price. So thank you. This is the last slide, I believe.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wadwa. And now I'd like to introduce our final presentation for the day, Mr. Arnaud Dubrak, the Regional Energy Specialist from the Agence Française de Développement in India. Mr. Dubrak.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me to this summit and to inviting AFD. I don't know if you can share my presentation. I will try to go quickly through it and
okay, just give me a moment.
If not, I can maybe share it. If you prefer, I can maybe share it, or if that's okay. Okay, fine. Thank you very much. So the next slide, please. Let's just present in a few words the main components of AFD strategy to support energy transition. This strategy is covering 3 focus areas and 3 acceleration levers. As you can see, 3 focus areas going from access to energy services, energy efficiency, and modernized and decarbonized energy supplies. Of course, these focus area could be strongly linked with what are the objectives of ISA. Let's highlight 3 points. The first is the first time that in this strategy energy efficiency is as a focus. And second, that beyond these instruments, we are knowledge how important is the acceleration levers. It means that we do disposition ourselves also in the dialogue of public policies and long pathways, including NDC. And the third point is that we do continue to reinforce our action on capacity buildings, on sectoral reforms, and financing of innovation. Next slide, please. And so we are doing it through diversified financial tools, of course, all applicable for solar project fundings. AFD Groups has the capability to finance private and public sectors, and also non-for-profit organizations. The private through its Proparco subsidiary, and the public through AFD, which these different tools, financing tools. Next slide, please. In 2019, the AFD Groups has financed 2.8 billion euros in the energy sector, which represents almost 20% of AFD's activities. Around 1 billion is benefiting to the private sector, with the Proparco activity directly and some credit lines. If we make a focus on our Proparco activity, and you will see it through the scheme of Proparco by technology, you will see that the share of solar technology has strongly increased in the portfolio from the 2008. And it's very interesting to see how far this solar energy has taken a main share in this portfolio. Next slide, please. Then a quick breakdown by strategic priorities also. You see that the 2.8 billion is almost represented mainly by renewable energy and networks improvement, which is also strongly linked with what the ISA wants to, the objective of ISA. But we can also have some efforts on the support for transition policies, which can help a lot in the regulatory framework, in the globally enabling private investment, for instance, the guarantee mechanisms. And access for all, which is also one of our main goals and one of the goals of the ISA. Next slide, please. I mentioned just two main energy transition political commitments from AFD. One is directly linked to Africa on renewable energy, with a commitment of 3 billion euros for renewable energy and access between 2016 and 2020. And the other one is for ISA, with a political commitment, which has been announced by our president in last year, which is to have 1.5 billion euro for solar energy between 2016 and 2022 for the country members of ISA. And so right now, at the end of 2019, we already are at 1 billion euro of financing, corresponding more or less to 2.6 gigawatt of energy. And we also established a strong partnership with ISA on Farsi programs, and as mentioned by the World Bank, also on the solar risk mitigation mechanism and initiative. Next slides, please. To contribute to ISA programs directly, if we speak about contribution of IFD, we can make a link between IFD's energy strategy and ISA programs. Concerning the solar application for access and rural electrification, let's mention some kind of project funded by IFD in 2019 by IFD Group. Among the 6 projects that were financed for electrification through different mechanisms, including ONGs financing or equity and loans to private sector. And next slide, please. So here are 2 selected projects, one for private sector and one for public sector. For private sector in Nigeria, Proparco last year, with the support of the European Union, has signed a $3 million USD equity investments in the company Reinsus Holding, which is a major player in off-grid solar power generation. This is the kind of example, and it's not the only example in the past that Proparco has financed through equity some of these rural and specialists of grid power generation. Has been also the case in Guatemala or in India in the past years. And as a public effort, AFD and ADEME, the French Agency for Ecological Transition, launched last year also a call for projects for energy access, led by NGOs and by small enterprise in Africa, through medium grants and technical assistance. 10 projects were selected at the beginning of this year, with strong components of solar, for instance, for agricultural applications, or for nanogrids, solar nanogrids, and so it can impulse some kind of innovations also in the framework of the solar sector. Next slides, please. Other kind of programs of ISA, the affordable finance at scale for solar energy programs, of course, which is a very big and important one, and modernized and decarbonized energy supply is key for IFD and to comply, of course, with the Paris Agreement goal and the SDGs 7 goals. And it can be also improved through these regulatory mechanisms by country, and the cost reduction has made solar energy among the most popular renewable energy technology during the last years. Next slide, please. So in 2019, concerning this kind of program and this kind of projects, AFD has financed around 700 million euros for power generation, among which 27% are for solar, so around 200 million euros for solar. 2 examples of projects, one on the private sector in Senegal, where Proparco financed through 7 million euro loans, co-finance 44 megawatt plant in Senegal, And in Burkina Faso, which is one of the leaders of solar energy in Africa, AFD finance also through concessional loan 136 million euro for solar energy deployment, including several plants. Next one, please. As I said, Burkina Faso was one of the first countries which implemented solar energy on the public sector, and AFD financed some plant of 33 megawatts near from the capital, which is already commissioned now for more than 2 years ago. Concerning the next one, please. Concerning the private financing, I mentioned two other countries of Africa which have been leading also the solar energy deployment in the continent. For instance, in Egypt, where AFD finance through Proparco, but both co-financing some part of the Benban solar complex, which at the end should reach the 1.8 gigawatts of energy. And in Senegal, which also is implementing strong solar plants, Proparco finance also this Synergy plant. Next one, please. But to answer to the question of financing intermediate amounts and size of solar plants as solar rooftops, which are generally less in terms of capacity than PV grounded plants. The way chosen by IFD is to provide intermediate financing for banks, for public banks or private banks, in order to finance companies and developers. So green credit lines benefit from with technical assistance grants also from instance from the European Union to provide assistance either to the banks or to the companies. In this case, this program has been implemented in Thailand, where several commercial centers have been covered with solar rooftop installations, thanks to these green credit lines. Next one, please. But to contribute or financing solar plant construction is key, of course, but to reach the energy transition goals. But there are other ways also to improve this solar energy deployment. For instance, the grid extension, reinforcement, and modernization, and AFD dedicated to almost 334 million euros last year concerning grid financing, which can improve, of course, better integration of renewable energy. It could be the case also for storage programs. And also launch a digital energy facility for the utilities in order to provide them also with technical assistance with the help of the European Union to put in way and to improve their digital sector and digital vision. And the third one should be, of course, also the support for energy transition policies, which will enable the private sector investment as the guarantee mechanisms that we are supporting. And also last year was launched the Energy Transition Partnership in Southeast Asia, which will be an initiative that will finance some technical assistance also to accelerate the energy transition in the region. With this slide, I finished, and thank you again.
Thank you so much, Monsieur Dubrac. It was most interesting and very, I think, of great interest and great use for our members to hear about the solar project financing models you've described, as well as the role of Agence Française de Développement. Thank you again. That now brings us to the end of our presentations for today, and we'll be moving on to country interventions. First, however, there was a question on recruitment asked in the meeting chat, and I'd be first handing over to Mr. Anand Rao to quickly respond to that question. Anand?
Yeah, thank you, Fiona. The question was whether the international positions will be open for ISA member countries only. So this was the question. So what we would like to clarify on this is A, we will mention this rule in the vacancy announcement. We'll make it clear during the vacancy announcement, number one. And B, in consultation with the standing committee, we will work out how to operationalize the process. This is B. But however, the rule position says recruitment will be primarily from member countries as approved by the ISA Assembly. Our regulation requires us to place due regard on recruiting primarily from member countries on a wide geographical basis. So this is the rule. However, we'll clarify, we'll post it on the vacancy announcement and make it clear. Thank you.
Fiona, you can request the countries also give any comments if they have on this part, the primarily part. And please take permission to extend that session for some time, because we are supposed to complete at 1:30. So we take the permission to extend for 15 or 20 minutes or half an hour.
Thank you, DG. As DG mentioned, if countries do have comments on the recruitment process and the proposed direction, please send those through to Anand Rao so that those views may be considered. I will now be opening the floor to country interventions. Firstly, I would like to call on Mr. Mani from the Togolese embassy, who I understand had a question earlier, and I'd like to ensure that he has an opportunity to ask that. Monsieur Mani?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Fiona. Good afternoon, distinguished participant. Allow me to discharge a pleasant duty, that of transmitting the friendship of the Minister of Mine and Energy of Togo to all participants. The 27 ISA summit today concern a very rich agenda in terms to resume summit 12 virtual board till such time situation improve. We would like to thank all panelists for their valuable information related to the theme of the meeting, affordable financing for solar projects. They have demonstrated the possibility available to our state to carry out their solar projects at a low cost. Togo is very active in the Dome initiative, which aims to set up a collective framework for financing projects. The Dome initiative was supported by AFD and the Cabinet Ernest Yang was recruited to conduct a feasibility study. The cabinet made a final restitution in April 2020. So, Togo welcome Alliance initiative to find the affordable finance for solar project. Thank you. But according to me, to request one clarification about innovative financing instrument. I just asked this for my own edification. What kind of project that program take care? It's possible to give me the details? Thank you very much.
Jagjeet, perhaps this is one for you to respond to.
Well, Jagjeet, would you like to respond? Or anyone who talked about projects? Sure. Yeah, please go ahead.
Sir, I frankly couldn't hear the question clearly, so if someone could summarize it with me. There was some connection problem, sir, at my end.
Oh, sure.
Okay. Yeah, I repeat. Yeah, I request more clarification about innovative financial instrument concerning the solar risk mitigation initiative. I ask, what kind of project that program take care of? Thank you.
Is Amit available online from the World Bank to respond to it, particularly Maldives projects?
It looks like Amit has left the conversation.
I'll respond to that. In fact, Amit Jain, who is from the World Bank, he gave specific example of Maldives. In Maldives, what they did, the World Bank has put in money to ensure credit enhancement mechanisms in 3 ways. They give a sort of guarantee for the companies who operate, and also it reduces the cost of capital. And the same thing the World Bank did partly in India also. They gave $500 million to the State Bank of India, and the State Bank of India gave that money to companies who put rooftop projects but reduce the cost of capital. For example, State Bank of India gave loans at around 8.5 to 9%, which is, compared to the market rate of 12 to 13% is much less. So essentially, MI is so that the benefit pumps, we find that countries a financial work for these 6 ROSEP countries who are among the 22 countries of ours who have actually given their demand for solar pumps. So any off-grid project can come. It can be home lighting systems, it can be mini grids, it can be rooftop. So we are trying to use more and more of ROSEP, but ROSEP is limited right now to 23 countries or 19 countries with a total investment of 333 million. Government of Netherlands have put in money, and AFD also has, I think, put in 50 million euros. And the whole idea is to reduce the cost of capital. There is a demand to extend the ROSEP facility to other countries, including the small island development countries, but that is not yet, not yet has been announced. But I'm sure World Bank must be working on that to spread it to more and more countries, so that more and more people can avail the benefit of reduced cost of capital for off-grid projects. Thank you.
Thank you, DG. In order to ensure that we can get to as many country interventions as possible, what I would ask is if you do have an intervention, if you could please raise your hand, and then our IT team will let me know that there is an intervention, and I'll call on you in turn. The next intervention that I'm aware of is Mr. S.K. Saini. Mr. Saini, would you like to intervene?
Good afternoon. I'm really impressed with the most informative session today we had, and especially the presentation on DGT model by Mr. Sunil Vadwa. I think this is one way when we can achieve ISA's objective of energy access to all at the most economical cost and the fastest way. And this model, in fact, can be piloted, and it's very innovative. It can be a co-community owner type of model where after a certain lock-in period, the community becomes the owner and they can use the free electricity for rest of the life of the plant. So this can be further explored how the model can be designed and implemented. In fact, I would suggest that a team should work on this applicability of this model, and probably ISA can take some steps to do a pilot in some of the countries. Thank you.
Well, Mrs. Saini, if I can respond to your point, although you don't represent the country, yes, the whole thing is based on essentially it boils down to, how ISA can use this model. We will list out the existing tariff in the countries, those who have participated in the mini-grid program. And then it is, X minus Y is equal to Z. So Y is given. Y is given in each country. We know the known tariff, and the bidding can be for X. And these both will be variable as, X minus Y, Y changes, Z will change. So this is a good idea, yes, and we will work in it. Maybe by next summit, we'll present something which can be discussed. It's a good idea. And most countries may agree to it because it doesn't cost the country in real terms because they will avoid the grid connectivity, so the cost is being saved. And in fact, I can tell the previous chief minister in Andhra Pradesh, he once wrote that it is cheaper for the government of the province to give a free pump free off-grid pump to the farmer, because this avoids, putting 5 poles, giving connectivity, and giving tariff subsidy for next 50 years. So this is a good model. I think we'll work on it and we'll see how best we can take it further. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, DG. Thank you, Mr. Saini. The next intervention I'd like to call upon is Mr. Desh Sahai, the Honorary Consul of Tilna. Mr. Sahai, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Excellency, Mr. Niru Shekhar, Secretary MNRE, Excellency, Director General, ISA, and our esteemed speakers and colleagues. Thank you very much for this meeting. The Sun Meet, which started as a get-together, has become a brand name as ISA. Thank you very much for arranging this meeting, especially during this lockdown period. To start with, on a lighter note, but it said that there is no hardship allowance available in Delhi, and he said that a lot of advantages of having very clean atmosphere. I hope he doesn't want this lockdown to continue for long. Thank you. Before not taking long time, I'd like to congratulate ISA for doing an excellent work and for being of great help to the various countries. We are thankful to the Director General for his imaginative initiative under our collective guidance. ITEC, the National Institute of Solar Energy, where 10 of our participants from Congo have taken training. MTech and MBA NIIT program, undergraduate program announced recently, ISA's Studium Plus scheme, Star C, and Sun World, and of course the Sun Meet Labor meeting. The technology mission and field visit for policymakers in such a short time, ISA has become an intergovernmental body with global brand and reputation. ISA has arrived at a stage to take off to the next level. We congratulate the Secretariat and the motivated staff under the leadership of Director General who are now poised to take ISA to the next level with the globalization of staff with 16 international officers, mobilization of resources of 100 million to launch projects under various programs. ISA network of around 40 partners is of great help in implementing projects. Indian PSUs such as EELC, EESL has done a great work, and we have benefited for this demand aggregation of solar pumps. Our meeting with the Director General and his team to implement the solar water pump project in Tonga were of great help, and we are sure the same will be true for other member countries. We welcome the new proposed program in solar heating and cooling. Now, a few very few suggestions. We understand that ISA has incubated solar risk mitigation initiative as explained today. A credit enhancement mechanism is the work in several countries. We have heard how Maldives have benefited from this program. ISA should replicate these programs in island countries with active assistance of the World Bank and India. Now, another is last year, the Prime Minister Modi had announced a concessional line of credit of $150 million, which can be achieved, availed by Pacific Island states for undertaking solar energy and climate-related projects. This is of great, as this demand has been there for a long time. We're very thankful to the Government of India for allowing this concessional finance. We request ISA and Ministry of MNID to operationalize this scheme as early as possible. You see, our needs of the small island countries are very small. Our projects are of just few million, and if these projects are sort of processed for Exim Bank loans at the usual, procedure, their project costs are of a couple of $100 million. It's going to take a long time. We urge ISA to kindly take up with MEA that these requirements of small, outlays of a couple of $1 million, say $3, $4, $5 million, should be done on a fast track. We again thank ISA, the host country, and for arranging this meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Honorary Consul. I'd now like to next pass to Ms. Josephine Netiam Eyal from the Embassy of the Gabonese Republic. Would you like to make an intervention now? Ms. Josephine? Ms. Josephine, would you like to make an intervention now?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you very much. Sorry. Okay. I would like to thank you for this very interesting session. I just want to extend the message from our Ministry of Energy from Gabon that Gabon has already sent the amendments. The amendment from Gabon has been sent already to ICE, and we will be very happy to bring our collaboration and our expertise to this noble project. And indeed, Gabon needs also solar grids and solar rooftop. So I think that very soon we will organize something in our country so that our population can benefit from this project. I have just, as a second clarification, I just want to know if we decide to organize a video conference with ICE, do we have the choice to organize this in French? This is my question. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
You are most welcome to have it in French. In fact, our officers, Cecile and Philippe, are French. Plus, we always have a translator in all conferences. So, most welcome. Any date, any time you tell, all our officers will love to have interaction with Gabon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Josephine. And it's fantastic news to hear about the amendment from Gabon, and just a really wonderful development. The next question, the next intervention I have, I understand, is from Ms. Nidhi Gupta, on recruitment, which I'll ask Anand to take. Nidhi, are you online to ask that question?
Yes, Fiona, thank you for the opportunity. So I represent Brazil. As you know, it is a country which has signed the ISA agreement but has not been able to ratify it yet. So my question is, for all the purposes, do you consider it as a member country? So which will again be important in knowing if Brazilian nationals are eligible for the international recruitment, and also if you're scheduling a video conference, like you said, the video conference meetings with the LAC region are being planned in July and August. So if you consider Brazil a member country, are you planning a video conference with Brazil in July and August? That's the question.
Well, there are three components. Video conferencing, yes. In fact, we plan to take up video conferencing even with signatory countries. We have 86 signatory countries. 67 countries are members. They have ratified, and some are founding members. So, we have promised a lot more to the founding members. In fact, they become the vice presidents based on the date of ratification, the date they presented the instrument of ratification. Yes, so third question first. Yes, we will have, video conferencing if you want, and we will organize the same way we do with members, because, and the other part is about your participation. In fact, signatory countries, last year, the 21 fellows we chose from various countries and who are in IIT Delhi for last 1 year, we give a fellowship of $1,000 per month plus plane fare, and they do a course in MTech. There are 4 to 6 fellows, if I'm right with the figures, who are from signatory countries. For example, we had 2 from Kenya, and Kenya had not, was not really a member at that time, not even now perhaps. And this year also we have got 67 applications and quite a few from signatory countries. So, but then we do primarily take people from member countries. Primarily meaning, first we give opportunity to the member countries, and if we do not have sufficient number, then we go to the member countries. So very clearly, there is a committee of 6 countries, and they choose the candidates. And what they did, they first listed out the candidates of member countries. When we had shortage, Then we went to the signatory countries. But then we have also countries who are not prospective member countries. That is 194 even members minus 121. But with the amendment, first amendment getting accepted out of 30, 27 have done. We have got 27 acceptances, and Gabon is 128 perhaps if they have not already counted, and then 2 more, and then everybody theoretically can be a prospective member country. So today, subject to the clarification we'll have from the standing committee, in this deferred session, priority will be given, or primarily the choice will be from member countries. Suppose we do not get adequate, and qualified candidates from member countries, then we will step into signatory countries. But if you can quickly do it, at least if you can quickly ratify and deposit the instrument of ratification, after 30 days it will come into effect. But maybe we will consider you as a member.
Okay. Thank you so much. We are trying our best.
Thank you.
The next intervention I have is Mr. Ravi Kant. Mr. Kant, are you online?
Yeah. So this is a small suggestion I would like to make, that if we see the solar map of India, because India is a leader in ISA, I have an observation that northeastern region is lagging behind, which require push and pull factors for accelerating the multiplier benefits to solar energy. And we have Department of Northeastern Region, DONAR, SAR knows, DG SAR knows very well. And we also have a Northeastern Council located in Shillong. I believe that if some more awareness programs and all, so that we can have the complete balanced regional development of solar energy map for the lead country, India. This is a small suggestion from my side. And thank you very much for giving this opportunity.
Well, this is not exactly a country intervention, but fine. We will, I think MNRE is in the link, and they have a whole lot of programs for Northeast, including giving those, the provinces special province status, where the subsidy percentage is much more than ordinarily they give. So, but anyway, we will convey to our member country, their host countries, we will convey it. Thank you.
Thank you, DG. I'm not aware of further country interventions or further interventions at this stage. So perhaps this might be an opportunity to wrap up the Sun Meet, and any further questions can be directed to the Secretariat. If that pleases you, DG.
Yes, fine, absolutely fine.
Excellent. I'll now hand over to Mr. Anand Rao for the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Fiona. On behalf of the International Solar Alliance, I'm extremely thankful to the Secretary, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, His Excellency Mr. Indushekar Chaturvedi, for taking out his precious time for delivering his inaugural remarks for this 27th Virtual Sun Meet. I also thank His Excellency the Director General of ISA, His Excellency Upendra Tripathi, for his dynamic leadership and valuable guidance. I extend our sincere thanks to all the esteemed members of the Global Advisory Committee for joining us today virtually from different locations. I also express our sincere thanks to the presence of corporate partners of ISA and others joining us today for their interventions. I must thank all the presenters from KPMG, AFD, World Bank, and colleagues from ISA for this informative presentation. I thank all the ISA fellows from IIT Delhi and all the participants who joined us today. Their presence has been invaluable and without any doubt has helped make today's meeting very useful and driving the mandate and mission of ISA. Once again, I thank you all and thank you very much and stay safe. Thank you. Thank you, Fiona.
Thank you,
Anand. Thank you, I think all our member countries and partner countries who participated, you have all have been a great source of inspiration. I will take more time. Thank you all.
Thank you all our excellencies, members, and prospective members who have joined us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a nice lunch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.